Good morning on this Sunday, May 30th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. State leaders begin hearings on Atlanta's violent crime wave, and the Fulton County Sheriff welcomes the help. Governor Brian Kemp says public schools can't require students to wear masks when they return in the fall, and another review of Fulton County's ballots from the 2020 election. Phil and Kathy are here along with Martha Zoller and Bobby Capel filling in for Theron. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
The Georgia House Committee on Public Safety and Homeland Security met this week to discuss their strategy going forward when it comes to Atlanta's surge in violent crime. Before they make any recommendations, there's a long list of people who want to testify.
We need to be talking to the rank and file police officers.
Mayor and the chiefs of police and community members.
I think we need to hear from citizens, the citizens that live here in Atlanta, activist groups, also churches.
Lawmakers took the first step in helping Georgia's capital city deal with a violent crime wave that is only getting worse. Murders up 57%. Aggravated assaults up 36% since this time last year. Committee members will decide if and when state intervention is needed.
We have to be able to communicate, be able to talk together. This is not them versus us. This is us trying to solve collectively a problem that's the crime wave that's hit the nation.
The committee plans to hold 2 hearings in June, another 2 in July. Martha, I'll start with you this week. How much do you think the city and the state can work together on this issue?
I think they have to, and we saw it happen a little bit last summer, but not enough. And I think now that Mayor Bottoms is not seeking re-election, it ought to be job one for her to work together with the state to be able to make it better. I mean, my daughter lives in Buckhead, and you ought to see the panic on her face when I come to visit for me to make sure I lock my car up and that I'm safe and doing those kinds of things. It is affecting the way day-to-day Atlantans are living their lives.
Bobby, what do you think the state should do, and where do you see this going?
Well, I think the state should work with the city to get this under control at this point. I mean, I saw some statistics in the last week that compared the Atlanta crime numbers, both mainly violent crime, to Chicago. And Atlanta, per 100,000 people, came out worse than Chicago. I mean, if we don't have a problem here, that tells me that we do. We have got to get something done, and it shouldn't be politicized. People need to sit down, work together on one thing. If they're only going to work on one thing together in the next few months, they have got to sit down and work on this crime issue. That means getting police more support that they need, but we're not going to police our way out of this problem. But we have to get them immediate support, and then we have to look to both the state and the city to figure out ways to move forward, and local communities to figure out how we can creatively solve these problems.
Phil, this week, Atlanta City Council member Antonio Brown had his car stolen when he was speaking at an event just a few feet away. He says the kids that stole his vehicle should not be prosecuted, even though he says one possibly had a gun.
Well, Antonio Brown is a disgrace. You know, just last year he voted to defund the police. Now he's whining that he wants his Mercedes back from the police that he hates. And it doesn't make any sense. But what we do need to do is, sad to say, we've got to work together with the Fulton County Sheriff. We've got to work with the GBI. I think these hearings are going to be very valuable. Governor Brian Kemp, for example, has already earmarked $5 million to help in the city of Atlanta to get the state police in there to stop this out-of-control car racing. And of course, we've talked about it on this show, and BJ Pak last week, the former U.S. attorney, outlined the gang crisis that still grips Atlanta and Georgia. And Mayor Bottoms, of course, is responsible for the permissiveness. She's got to work with the other state authorities to try to get control of this crime wave.
Kathy, we've seen the city and the state work together on multiple occasions. Is this just another issue? But this is obviously not one that is getting a lot of good publicity in terms of the crime wave.
Well, the crime wave's not getting good publicity, but you know, this is a very political thing. We're going into 2022. The governor's running for re-election. He's going to take advantage of everything he can to to solidify his base. But, you know, he's going to be sitting on about $5 billion in federal relief funds, as well as a $2.5 billion budget surplus. One thing he could do, because I know he only wants to do one-time expenditures, he could fund building a regional police training facility. Atlanta's training facility is just horrible. It's in an old elementary school at the end of an airport runway. It's just a disgrace. But he could build housing and the training facility for the city of Atlanta and let other smaller jurisdictions use it out of those funds and make a considerable contribution toward supporting our police forces. And I'd love to see him do that.
Martha, I see you want to respond.
Well, I don't think it's fair to say he's taking advantage of the situation. The situation is here. He is not making it worse than it is. I mean, you heard Bobby say that we are at a level of violence or more than Chicago. So we ought to work together. The governor has shown that he will do what it takes to keep the city safe, and we need to work together with him.
Bobby?
Yeah, I just want to mention one thing about that Councilmember Brown's car being stolen. He mentioned that it took 5 minutes for him to be on hold with 911, and it took 45 minutes for police to show up. Now, if we're wondering why we have a crime problem, in this case, maybe it wasn't a big deal. But if there was a violent crime that happened and it takes 5 minutes to hold on 911 and 45 minutes for the police to show up, and you're giving criminals a 45-minute head start, that's a problem.
Phil, I think that's why the chairman of the Buckhead City Movement was at the committee meeting. This week, though, a new group chaired by several prominent attorneys came out in strong opposition to Buckhead forming its own city. How realistic do you think this idea is? I know we've discussed it before, but do these types of happenings continue to give this movement momentum?
Well, Lori, you're underscoring something very important with regard to this movement to have the business section of Buckhead leave the city of Atlanta and become its own city. I think there's a 50-50 chance in the 2022 General Assembly that this cityhood could move forward. They have to do a feasibility study, of course, to see if it would be viable financially, and they have to meet certain other requirements under state law. But I think what's going to happen is if crime continues to increase, and by every indication with Mayor Bottoms absolutely doing virtually nothing to help, and to Bobby's point, officers are still retiring and leaving from the force because they're not given any backup by City Hall, I think that it's going to be quite a battle between the cityhood proponents and the opponents starting in January.
Kathy, it's a long road ahead for the proponents of this movement, but the opponents say, there will be new leadership soon, that, we should just wait to see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the determining factor. We now know the Mayor Bottoms won't be the mayor in January, and that would be a critical time for the General Assembly to decide if they're even going to support a cityhood movement. And then you've got to, win a vote of the citizens to do that. So I think that the chances are getting dimmer and dimmer. I think Mayor Bottoms stepping aside and allowing new leadership to come forward and engage will turn the tide on this, and I would be surprised if this is successful.
Martha, does that burst the balloon of these folks who are pushing for Buckhead cityhood, the fact that Mayor Bottoms has decided not to run again?
I don't know if burst the balloon is the right phrase, but I do think it buys some time for the people that don't want to create Buckhead City. I think that that's probably what happens there.
All right, Bobby, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just think that to Kathy's point, if you want an immediate impact, especially on the crime problem right now, support candidates who you think are going to help the crime problem, both in your city council races, in city council president, the at-large seats, and of course in the mayoral race. That's the most immediate fix. That's going to be happening in the next 6 months. Go there and see what happens.
I've always found crime will get the attention of voters. Phil, go ahead.
I just wanted to make one last comment that the legislature would have to pass this. It's a 2-year process to have a new city in Georgia. But I think why not let the people vote on it and just see what happens?
We'll leave it there, everybody. Thank you. Coming up, Governor Kemp says public schools should not require students to wear masks when they return in the fall. We'll discuss.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
The time for mandates is over, so says Governor Brian Kemp when it comes to schools requiring students to wear masks when they return this fall. He plans to sign an executive order making sure students can enter school mask-free. Martha, this doesn't prevent anyone from wearing a mask if they want to. Your thoughts, because I understand he's already getting some pushback from Atlanta Public Schools.
He is, and it's from the expected people that he's getting pushback from. In the more urban areas, there's been more concern about keeping masks on and doing that sort of thing. In the rural areas, basically, we've been in school since August, and we're down to about 7% of people saying they want to do online education. I think we should leave this up to the parents. I think it should be a guideline. That's what the governor is saying. This is the people that should be wearing masks. You should be vaccinated, that kind of thing, but not requiring it and leaving it up to the parent.
Bobby, Governor Kemp says he's tired of the pandemic politics.
Well, isn't that ironic? Because this is the exclamation point on pandemic politicization over the last 12 months to a year. This is ridiculous. We have got to have our kids back in the classroom this fall, and they have to stay in the classroom. And we have to be giving our schools every tool in the tool chest to be able to combat a potential outbreak that would send them back to remote learning. I'll tell you, as a parent, and knowing a lot of parents as well that have children in school, I cannot fathom the idea of having an outbreak in a school this fall and then not being able to keep the children in school with masks because the governor has decided to politicize this once again. It is ludicrous.
Martha, back to you. You're raising your hand.
Yeah, just because we've had experience now in probably about 100 school systems across the state where they were open all year long and they didn't have outbreaks. So I think using best practices, and obviously I believe in local control and full disclosure. I'm a member of the Georgia State School Board. So I think it should be up to local school systems to say we don't know how to control outbreaks in schools is just not accurate.
Well, you know, on this topic of masks, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene was on the receiving end of a lot of criticism this week, even from members of her own party, when she said businesses that require employees show proof they've been vaccinated is no different than when the Nazis forced Jewish people to wear gold stars. Phil, your reaction to the Congresswoman's choice of words here.
Well, if I was her public relations consultant or anybody's public relations consultant, the first rule would be don't compare anything to the Holocaust in Europe during World War II that cost the lives of millions of Jews and others. So just stay away from that. If you're in politics, it was a rookie mistake.
Kathy, your thoughts, because you know we're heading into 2022. The national media loves to write about Marjorie Taylor Greene. How much do you think this could hurt Republicans?
I don't know. You know, what we learned from the Trump era is that people love to watch inflammatory stuff and, you know, look at Twitter, look at Facebook, and then send tons of money. And that's what she's doing. She's saying inflammatory things to get attention, and she's getting it. And I really hope that people who live in that district make a different choice in the next election. And, you know, all of us need to be careful about the people that we vote for and make sure that we're voting for people who are serious about public policy and doing the job as a public servant. And she's just simply not. She has no interest in contributing constructively to the healing of our nation and moving us forward out of this difficult time. And I just sincerely hope someone else wins.
Bobby?
Well, I have a client who's running against her up there named Marcus Flowers. He's a U.S. Army veteran and a Democrat. And I got to tell you, we were at the America First rally last night or earlier this week in Dalton. And I got to tell you, just to lay eyes on this thing up close is something to behold. In fact, Marcus was there as a constituent, and he got thrown out of the building because he was deemed a, quote, threat. Now, why do you think that is? You can see the video on my Twitter feed at Bobby Capel, but it is outrageous, the things that this woman says, and it's hurtful to people. And beyond that, it's divisive and dangerous for our democracy.
All right, I want to move on now to the lieutenant governor's race here in Georgia. Senator Butch Miller threw his hat into the ring. Already, state reps Eric Allen and Derek Jackson have entered the race. On the Republican side, activist Jean Seaver has already announced her intention to run. Phil, this will be a race to watch now that Jeff Duncan decided not to run for a second term.
That's right. It's an open seat in Republican primary politics. I think you'll see at least one other big name coming. I know that State Senator Burt Jones is looking at either lieutenant governor or perhaps another office. You're going to have some crowded primaries in May with both political parties.
Kathy, what do you think Democrats are doing here? What's their strategy?
Hey, work hard, raise money, get out there and meet the voters, and help people understand why change is good. And I think that folks are still going to be very interested in elections. We've got lots of practice in voting, and Democrats are going to have a great slate in 2022. And Lieutenant Governor is certainly going to be one of the things we're looking at.
Martha.
Butch Miller is one of those guys that gets along with everyone. He is truly an example of a Republican that almost has Johnny Isaac's qualities as far as being able to draw from both sides of the aisle. He is a different kind of Republican, and he's from Gainesville. I know him very well. He is a business owner. I think it's going to make it a very interesting race because he's not going to be a radical Republican candidate.
Interesting observation. He definitely is personable. I've had covered him for years. All right, everybody, thank you. We'll move on. Coming up, it's another review, another one, of Fulton County's ballots from the 2020 election. We'll discuss next.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger says he welcomes yet another review of Fulton County's ballots from the 2020 election. This one stems from a lawsuit and the Henry County judge who ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, though says the ballots have to remain in the custody of Fulton County. Phil, how is this one different, and what do you think the plaintiffs will find, if anything?
It's different because this is a forensic audit of the ballots, and a lot of journalists get confused. Some call it a recount. No, it's an audit, and this will be in depth. For example, let's look at the ballot stuffing allegations that have occurred in Fulton County. Of course, Fulton County has a horrible history of fraud and mismanagement anyway. So they're going to be comparing those envelopes to the actual ballots and see if the count matches. That's just one example. And I have to laugh at Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger now welcoming it. He fought this tooth and nail until the judge allowed it.
Bobby, Fair Fight calls this a sideshow, not an audit.
Well, like Phil, I do also have to laugh at Brad Raffensperger's reaction to this, but for a different reason. I don't understand why Republicans are so fascinated with this. I would think by now they'd be bored with continuing to rehash the election that they got smoked in several swing states, including right here in Georgia. But apparently not. They cannot get enough of this. They're going to keep talking about it to their own detriment, pushing the big lie. It's going to be problematic for them statewide. And I'm very curious to see, we were just talking about the primaries statewide, what kind of slate of candidates they come out with, because if they come out with supporters of the big lie, they're going to be in trouble again in 2022.
Martha and then Kathy.
Well, I tell you, I don't know if 12,000 votes is being smoked. And I think that we have a lot of strong Republican voters out there. While I think that we need to watch any of this recount or forensic audit, Democrats and Republicans are going to have strong candidates. And there were 500,000 Republicans that didn't turn out on January 6th that voted on November 3rd, and only 150,000 Democrats. There are still plenty of Republicans to win elections. So we need to watch that. It's not smoking.
Kathy?
Well, this kind of challenge and audit is going on in other places around the country by folks that support the big lie, that have brought lots of lawsuits, that are conspiracy theorists, and we're seeing it play out again here. And I think what we need to do after 3 audits in Fulton County that have sustained the same result, we need to stop indulging this behavior. At a certain point, you just get up, go home, and call it a loss and start over the next thing, as Martha said. But we have to be very careful not to indulge people who are just trying to get attention. And one of the folks that's bringing this lawsuit, has been trying to overturn the federal government because he thinks it's an illicit government. I mean, we just, we cannot play so recklessly with our elections.
All right, I want to move on to Stone Mountain, where the board approved changes to the Memorial Park, including a museum exhibit that will, quote, tell the truth about the park and the carvings. The board also approved the removal of Confederate Flag Plaza from the walk-up trail to a less popular area. Bobby, some say this is a first step, but it doesn't go far enough.
I've often wondered why it is that we have the largest Confederate monument here in Georgia here in 2021. It's a little odd. It's a little out of step with reality and the times. And it's also very odd to me that we are celebrating the losing side of a war in which they revolted against the United States of America. So if this is the first step, okay. But in general, I've never understood the fascination with this.
Phil.
You know, Southern history and Confederate history is a part of United States history, and a lot of the cultural barbarians are never going to agree with that. They want to knock down statues, and some want to attack the carving on Stone Mountain. It is a memorial to the fallen soldiers of Georgia who fought for the Confederate cause in the 1860s. Why don't we teach the full history of what happened during that Civil War? It's a perfect place to do it. I think that, yes, you can obviously have an objective explanation, but I think that let's keep it the way it is. It's the state's main tourist attraction. Why not have Civil War reenactments and have school children learn about why did the Confederacy break away? How about why the Union won and the reconciliation? I think it's a great place to do that.
Kathy, do you think we will eventually move to, or are we moving towards the removal of the carving?
Well, it's going to be a pretty hard thing to move, but I think there are lots of good suggestions on what might be done there. But what we got to make sure happens is that we keep moving forward on addressing this issue. And I think one of the next things that needs to happen is that legislators, particularly those who represent that area, need to come forward with a package of legislation that frees up the ability of the board out there to take additional action that they're restricted right now by law to do.
Martha, weigh in here.
No, I think that one of the biggest challenges you got to have with Stone Mountain is there is a storied and negative history that goes along with what happened there, and that has to be told. But I think it's very unlikely that the carving's going to be removed because, as they said in the press conference, it's going to take a small tactical nuclear weapon to get rid of that particular carving. I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think the story needs to be told because there are parts of the story that are uncomfortable for us to hear, but we have to hear them and we can't forget it. It doesn't take away the sacrifices that happened on both sides, but it does mean that we have to accept what actually happened.
Kathy, I've got 10 seconds. I saw your hand up.
Oh, my good friend Ryan Gravel thinks we should just stop cleaning it and let it reforest itself from whatever grows off the side of that mountain. And I think that could be a very interesting project.
All right, everybody, thank you. Coming up, we'll have winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Well, on this Memorial Day weekend, we'd like to take a moment to honor those who fought and died while serving this country. And Phil, I'm going to start with you this week because you have such a patriotic background there.
Well, thank you, Lori. I want to make a winner the state of Georgia. It got a AAA bond rating again, and that is due to sound fiscal management. The nation's 3 major credit agencies awarded that, and only 9 states have that. So this is a great state to do business with. And a very prominent member of the Atlanta business community passed away a few days ago, and that was Pete Correll. He was the longtime CEO of Georgia Pacific, and he was a great philanthropist. He'll be missed.
That is a big loss for Georgia for sure. Thanks, Phil. Kathy, over to you.
Yep, I also want to just send condolences to the family of Marissa McCall. She was the public policy director at the Southern Center for Human Rights. She passed away also this week. I know her family and friends and colleagues will miss her, but we'll really miss her advocacy on criminal justice reform down at the Capitol. She was instrumental in the work on repealing our citizens arrest law and other work, and she'll be missed. My loser this week, yet again, is Governor Brian Kemp for refusing to fully expand Medicaid. And we saw another rural hospital close as a result of that decision. The hospital in Cuthbert, Georgia, in Randolph County closed this week. Not unanticipated, but they asked for full Medicaid expansion so that they would have paying clientele, and that didn't happen. And so now that area doesn't have a hospital.
All right, Kathy, thank you. Bobby, we've got some time. We've got about 2 minutes. Your turn.
Okay, I'll start with loser for this week, and that is Jody Heiss. This was at one time a principal conservative who has now gone full the big lie. He was introducing Marjorie Taylor Greene at her rally this week with Matt Gaetz up in Dalton. It's sad to see that happen to the Republican Party. In addition, let's go to the winners. I've got 2 quick ones. All the high school graduates, including my niece and nephew who graduated this week. Very exciting time for them. Big futures ahead. And secondly, Phil will be surprised by this, but Senator Johnny Isakson. Senator Isakson unveiled his next venture, which is going to be a new nonprofit to look into research and funding to help people with Parkinson's disease, and I think that's great for him.
Oh, that is great. Great news to hear. Martha, over to you.
So my winner is Senator Butch Miller for throwing his hat in the ring for the lieutenant governor's race. He's going to run a very different kind of race, and it's going to be fun to watch. Also, I have a quick winner, Buck Randolph and the guys at Randolph Barbershop in Gainesville. I went over there yesterday to talk a little politics with the folks that were coming in and out, and it was a lot of fun. So I want to make them a winner. And then my loser is Representative Matt Gaetz, who came in from Florida, has his own problems, and is attaching himself to Marjorie Taylor Greene in a way that I have never seen. So he is my loser this week. We don't need him in Georgia.
All right,
There's
Bobby.
something we can all agree on.
Bobby, real quick, you did have a preschooler
Exactly.
graduate. You missed congratulating.
Yes, my 5-year-old twins graduated preschool as well, so that was a lot of waterworks for the Capel family this week.
All right, everybody, we'll end it there and end on winners. Thank you, and thank you all for joining us. We will see you again next week.